They told us that non-human intelligences are, in reality, demons, and they have a reason for this. Somewhere in the mountains of Tennessee, in the early months of 2026, a group of American pastors gathered in a rented house. The door closed. The phones went off the table by agreement before the meeting began. 5 American evangelical leaders were in the room, patched in by phone. A sitting Republican congressman from Missouri who serves on the federal task force on classified material. Weeks later, those pastors began telling their congregations what they had been warned about: a coming disclosure, non-human craft, an alternative origin story for the human species. One, they said, that would cause many Christians to abandon the faith if it landed without preparation. The Pentagon would not release its files for months. In the previous video of this series, I showed you that within 72 hours of the files going public, the religious answer was already locked in place. The vice president saying demons on a podcast, a congresswoman posting a biblically accurate angel within hours of the release. The word demon itself, a word that 2,000 years ago meant something entirely different from what every American watching this thinks it means. That was the public layer. What was happening at the same time, in rooms with closed doors and microphones off, you were not told. While one tradition reached for the loudest word in its toolkit, another tradition already had a category shaped to fit what the Pentagon is describing. The Vatican was studying that category in private. American evangelicals had not yet noticed it existed, and the British public health establishment, in the same months the pastors were meeting in Tennessee, was publishing risk assessments estimating that confirmed disclosure could leave between 210 million and 636 million people in psychological collapse. The institutions were calculating. The institutions were preparing. The only ones not preparing were us. And it is not only the Western world that is preparing. The East is doing so as well. The Arabic root is JNN, 3 consonants. The verb formed from this root, jana, means to cover, to conceal, to hide. A jana is a garden, a place covered by foliage. A janin is an embryo, a being concealed inside the womb. A majnun is a person possessed, their reason hidden from them. The same 3 consonants produce the noun jinn. The Arabic word means, in its most literal sense, the hidden ones, the concealed ones, the ones whose nature is to remain veiled from human perception. The word describes a condition of being. In its original Quranic usage, it carries no moral charge of evil or good. It names beings who exist alongside humans, but are normally invisible to them. The Islamic tradition built around this word is 1,400 years old. It precedes by centuries every modern conversation about non-human intelligence, and it contains, already worked out in detail, almost every category 21st century UAP researchers are now reaching for. The Quran, in Surah 51, verse 56, has God say something whose precision is striking. I did not create the jinn and humankind except to worship me. In a single line, 2 species of created intelligent being are named. 2, where most religious systems would name 1. Both made for the same purpose, both held to the same standard, both granted in the Islamic theological framework, free will, and therefore both capable of belief and unbelief, of obedience and rebellion. This sits in the text itself, recited 5 times a day in some form by approximately 2 billion people. It is not marginal commentary. Surah 55, verses 14 and 15. Ar-Rahman, the chapter named after one of the names of God, gives the material composition. He created the human from clay, like that of pottery, and he created the jinn from a smokeless flame of fire. 2 creations, 2 materials, the human from baked earth, the jinn from a fire without smoke, a flame at its purest state. In the Islamic understanding, the jinn are material beings, made of a different material than humans, occupying the same world as humans, but at a frequency or modality the human eye is not equipped to perceive. They are not allegory, not symbol, not spirit in the disembodied sense. The Arabic theological literature treats them as a parallel civilization, older than humanity, created, according to most commentators, thousands of years before Adam. The closest equivalent in Western vocabulary is something we do not have a clean word for in English: a parallel intelligent species, hidden in plain sight, ontologically equal to humans, morally diverse. The word demon does not begin to describe it. The most consequential figure in the entire Islamic mythology of the jinn is named in the 2nd chapter of the Quran. Surah 2, verse 34. The angels are commanded to bow before the newly created Adam. They all do, all of them, the text specifies, except Iblis. The narrative is recognizable on the surface to anyone raised in a Christian or Jewish context. It looks like the fall of Lucifer, the prideful angel who refused to honor the human. Then Surah 18, verse 50, specifies the detail that breaks the parallel. Iblis, the text says, was of the jinn. Iblis arrives in the text as the prototype of jinn refusal, the first member of a parallel species who chose, with full knowledge of his creator, to disobey. This single textual fact rearranges the entire architecture of the cosmic story as Muslims tell it. The figure who in Western Christianity becomes Satan, fallen archangel, light bearer, second in command turned rebel, is, in the Quranic account, a member of a different species altogether. He refused out of contempt for humanity rather than envy of God. The Islamic shaitan arrives as a hostile member of a parallel civilization with his own offspring, the shayatin, the satans, plural, and his own hatred for the human race, which he sees as an inferior creation given undue honor. This is a different story than the Christian one, told in a different vocabulary, arriving at different conclusions about what kind of being is doing the haunting. The Quran gives the jinn an entire chapter to themselves. Surah 72, Al-Jinn. The chapter is short, 28 verses, and it opens with a striking conceit. A group of jinn, the text says, have come and listened in secret to the recitation of the Quran by the Prophet Muhammad. They have heard it. They have understood it. They have been converted. They return to their own community, their own tribes, and announce that a new prophet has appeared among the humans and that they themselves now believe. Indeed, we have heard a remarkable recitation. It guides to the right course, and we have believed in it. The chapter, in other words, is told from the jinn's point of view. The audience is given, briefly, the perspective of a parallel species encountering a human revelation. The text continues, in their voice, with a description of their own world worth listening to carefully. Among us are the righteous, and among us are otherwise. We are of divergent ways, and we have come to know that we cannot escape God in the earth, nor can we escape him by flight. And among us are those who have submitted, and among us are those who deviate from what is right. A morally diverse population, some pious and some not, some believing and some not. The full range of moral choice you find in any human society. The chapter also says, in verse 6, "Indeed, there were men from among humankind who sought refuge with men from among the jinn, and they only increased them in burden." A reference, the classical commentators all agree, to a pre-Islamic Arabian practice, humans approaching jinn for protection, for divination, for power. The practice is condemned. The condemnation, however, presupposes the practice, which presupposes that the pre-Islamic Arabs of the 6th and early 7th centuries understood the jinn as accessible beings, real enough to be worshipped, bargained with, feared. The Quran does not invent the jinn. It regulates them, pulling them out of the cult of pre-Islamic worship and reclassifying them as fellow creatures, fellow worshippers, fellow accountable beings. 11 centuries later, an Iranian Muslim scholar named Zakaria al-Qazwini compiled a vast encyclopedia of cosmography and natural history. His book, finished around 1283 of the Common Era, contains an extensive section on the jinn. Qazwini's classification of jinn forms is one of the most detailed in the medieval Islamic tradition. He describes their ability to take multiple forms. He describes specific manifestations associated with desert places, ruins, rivers, deep waters. The jinn, in his account, exist as beings with bodies in the strict sense, but bodies of a different material composition, allowing them to appear and disappear, to assume different shapes, to occupy locations that solid human bodies cannot occupy. A modern Western reader running across Qazwini's descriptions in 2026, after spending an afternoon on the war.gov/UFO portal, has an immediate recognition. A class of being made of a material substance that humans cannot perceive directly, capable of appearing in multiple forms, capable of physical interaction with the human world, and associated in the older accounts with specific terrestrial locations: deserts, ruins, deep waters. The Western UAP community, working from the outside, has now produced a phrase for this category. They call it the crypto-terrestrial hypothesis. In June of 2024, the journal Philosophy and Cosmology published a peer-reviewed paper with that title, The Crypto-Terrestrial Hypothesis, a case for scientific openness to a concealed earthly explanation for unidentified anomalous phenomena. The authors are credentialed academics, not fringe figures. Tim Lomas of the Human Flourishing Program at Harvard University, Brendan Case, also of Harvard, Michael Masters, professor of biological anthropology at Montana Technological University, 3 scholars publishing through normal peer review channels. Their argument runs roughly like this: the assumption that intelligent non-human life, if it exists in proximity to Earth, must necessarily have arrived from elsewhere, from another planet, another star system, is itself an unexamined premise of modern UAP discussion. The alternative hypothesis, which they argue deserves scientific openness, is that such intelligence is native to Earth itself, has been here much longer than humans, and has remained concealed through some combination of biological, technological, and behavioral strategies. The paper enumerates 4 subcategories: possibly an unknown branch of advanced hominid, possibly a non-human terrestrial species, descendants of saurians or other deep lineages that achieved technology before the asteroid extinction, possibly an extraterrestrial population that arrived in deep time and has been resident on this planet for so long that terrestrial is now an accurate description, possibly an extra-dimensional intelligence whose presence is woven into the physical structure of Earth in ways modern physics has not yet mapped. I recently published a video here on the channel exploring the possibility of non-human intelligence existing in the deep zones of Earth's oceans. I invite you to watch that video. The paper we were talking about is careful, in standard academic language, to call these hypotheses worthy of consideration rather than confirmed positions. What matters is what happens when a Muslim scholar reads it. The response came quickly. The Jinn Hypothesis and Modern UFO Phenomena by the British researcher Imran Hussain, published by the Sapience Institute, a British dawah and academic outreach organization directed by Hamza Andreas Zortzis, one of the more prominent Muslim apologists working in English in the present moment. Hussein's argument runs this way. The crypto-terrestrial hypothesis describes, in 21st century scientific language, almost exactly what the Islamic tradition has described under the category of jinn for 1400 years. Beings native to Earth, predating humans, made of a different material substance, normally invisible to human perception, capable of physical manifestation, morally diverse, and capable of interaction with humans, both hostile and friendly. Imran Hussein's claim is not that the Harvard authors are secretly Muslim. His claim is that the category they are reaching for, in the absence of religious vocabulary, is the same category the Quranic tradition reached for in the 7th century, and that the Islamic theological literature contains a far more developed account of this category than any Western framework yet produced. The paper has circulated widely in English-speaking Muslim media. It was subsequently expanded into a full booklet through the Sapience Institute, also titled The Jinn Hypothesis, an Islamic framework for interpreting the modern UFO phenomena. The British academic Christopher Playford has cited the connection in his own work on Islam and UAP phenomena. The American convert and Sufi Sheikh Hisham Miramati, in talks given to Muslim audiences in the United States across 2025 and 2026, has been more direct. We already know what these are. The Quran told us 1400 years ago. What is happening here is structurally identical to the reaction of the American evangelicals. but happening in a different vocabulary, with a different tradition, and arriving at a different interpretation on the surface, even though the move underneath is the same. The Pentagon released the files in May. A category was waiting. For the American evangelicals, the category was demons. For the Muslims engaging with this material, the category is jinn. For the crypto-terrestrial hypothesis academics, the category is concealed terrestrial intelligence. The phenomena being discussed are, in each case, the same. The same Pentagon files, the same instrumented incidents, the same 40% unresolved fraction. What changes is the frame. And the frame is doing enormous interpretive work. The frame is being installed in each tradition with extraordinary speed. On this specific question, what kind of being could behave the way the Pentagon files describe, the Islamic vocabulary holds a structural advantage. That is a vocabulary observation, not a theological one. The Christian demonological tradition, at its theological best, elaborates the moral category of demon richly, while saying very little about what these beings physically are. The Islamic tradition, working on the same kinds of phenomena over 1400 years, produced a parallel account that happens to map more cleanly onto the descriptive language now appearing in the AARO reports. Composition, habitat, social structure, morality, and reproductive biology, all worked out in detail. If the question being asked in 2026 is what kind of being could fly through restricted American airspace and execute 90-degree turns at 3,000 miles per hour without leaving a sonic boom, the Islamic answer, a being made of smokeless fire, occupying space at a frequency human instruments are not calibrated to detect, sits closer to the descriptive register of the Pentagon files than the standard Christian answer does. Sitting closer is not the same as being right. I am not Muslim, and the architecture of a vocabulary is not the same as the truth of a religion. The technical fit between an old language and a new phenomenon is what makes one tradition feel suddenly relevant in 2026, and that is what I am pointing at. The Islamic tradition also gives us something the Christian tradition, in its modern American form, has largely lost: a category of morally neutral jinn. The Christian demonology of the present moment, the one J.D. Vance reaches for, the one the Tennessee pastors carry, the one Tucker Carlson elaborates on his podcast, runs binary. Beings are either of God or of the devil. There is no third category, no messenger who is neither angel nor demon. The Augustinian inheritance foreclosed the in-between. The Islamic tradition kept it open. The jinn in standard Sunni and Shia theology include all moral conditions. There are Muslim jinn. There are pious jinn. There are merely indifferent jinn. Beings who, like most humans, are getting through their existence without any particular hostility toward anyone. There are wicked jinn, the shayateen, descendants of Iblis, actively hostile to humans. There are also jinn who, like some humans, simply don't care. Beings who occupy the same world as us and have no agenda regarding us at all. If, and this is a large if, some of the phenomena being reported in the Pentagon files correspond to interactions with a non-human intelligence, the Islamic framework permits the question which kind to be asked. The current American evangelical framework forecloses that question. Within that framework, if non-human intelligence is contacting humans, the contact is by definition hostile and by definition demonic. No other category is available. The Islamic vocabulary for this category of being maps onto the descriptive language of UAP reports more cleanly than the Christian vocabulary currently in circulation in the United States. Whether that fit reflects something true about reality or simply about how each tradition organized its categories is a question the rest of this series will keep returning to. The American religious response will absorb some of this. It is already starting to. Christian writers engaging with the crypto-terrestrial hypothesis have begun, in some cases, to import the Islamic category of morally diverse intermediate beings into their own theology, usually without crediting the Islamic source, but the conceptual migration is happening. A new theological vocabulary is being assembled in real time, in front of us, out of pieces drawn from Christian, Islamic, and academic traditions that have never sat at the same table before. The Quran, in Surah 6, verse 100, contains a verse that, in the present context, lands with unusual force. And they make the jinn partners with God, though he created them, and they falsely attribute to him sons and daughters without knowledge. Glory be to him, and exalted is he above what they describe. A Muslim reader in 2026, watching senior officials of a foreign government use the word demons to describe non-human beings whose existence the Pentagon is now formally acknowledging, will hear in this verse a 1400-year-old warning. The warning concerns the cosmic significance ascribed to these beings. The Quran affirms that they exist. The warning is that making them partners with God, or anti-partners, is itself a form of false worship. The Muslim position, expressed in its most classical form, is that the jinn are creatures, created beings, lower than humans in dignity in the Islamic theological hierarchy because humans were chosen for a particular relationship with God that jinn were not. To call any jinn a cosmic enemy of God is, from this view, to grant them a status they do not have. The Augustinian binary, again, looks small from the inside of the Islamic tradition. So does the current American religious panic. The two great houses of the post-biblical religious world, Christianity and Islam, are now responding to the Pentagon files in two very different vocabularies. The Christian response, especially in its loud American form, reaches for demons. The Muslim response, especially in its scholarly form, reaches for jinn. The phenomena being described are the same. The interpretive consequences are very different. American Christianity, in its evangelical and Catholic wings, is currently doing something extraordinary, and that is meant as observation, not praise. The institutional reaction to the Pentagon files, traced carefully, reads less as a community discerning a new phenomenon, and more as a community using a new phenomenon to consolidate categories it had already built for other reasons. The pastors briefed in Tennessee, the Vatican astronomers giving press conferences about extraterrestrials, the Pope's discreet statements about brothers in other worlds. None of it is isolated, and all of it is coordinated. Ezekiel was 30 years old. He was a priest of the Jerusalem temple, living in exile by the Chebar Canal in Babylonia, in the year that scholars now reconstruct as approximately 593 before the Common Era. The opening of the book that carries his name is unusual in the Hebrew Bible. The prophets normally begin with a formula. The word of the Lord came to so-and-so saying. Ezekiel begins differently. In my 30th year, in the 4th month, on the 5th day of the month, as I was among the exiles by the river Chebar, the heavens were opened, and I saw visions of God. The dating is precise. The location is geographically specific. The witness places himself by name, age, and occupation. What follows is a description so dense, so technical, and so determined to convey accuracy of observation that the rabbinic tradition declared the passage forbidden to public reading. Only learned scholars could touch it, and only privately. What Ezekiel describes in the first chapter of his book is a luminous wheeled vehicle. 4 living creatures, each with 4 faces, human, lion, ox, eagle, emerging from a storm wind out of the north. Wheels within wheels, the rims full of eyes, a crystalline firmament above their heads. On the firmament, a throne. On the throne, the likeness of a man. The figure on the throne speaks. Ezekiel receives instructions. He is told to go to a people of stubborn forehead and hardened heart and to deliver the words that follow. He falls on his face. The vision ends. In June of 2026, a sitting member of the United States Congress will tell reporters that the wheel within a wheel from Ezekiel 1 is, in her honest reading, probably the best description we have of what the Pentagon's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office is now investigating. The text was written 2,619 years before her statement. In early 2026, during the National Religious Broadcasters Convention in Nashville, a small group of American evangelical pastors gathered in private. The setting, by the public account of the participants, was an Airbnb. Phones off, no recordings. The names that have surfaced publicly: Bishop Alan Didio, founder of Encounter Today; Larry Ragland; Joseph Z., a Pentecostal preacher with a substantial podcast audience; Mike Signorelli, a charismatic minister who specializes in deliverance ministry, and Tony Merkel. Patched in by phone, Eric Burleson, Republican congressman from Missouri, a member of the House Task Force on the Declassification of Federal Secrets. Perry Stone, a Tennessee evangelist who runs one of the larger independent evangelical media ministries in the American South, was not himself in the room. He learned of the meeting from a friend who had been there. In April, Stone went public on his YouTube channel and described what his source told him. Within weeks, the story moved through religious media, into podcasting networks, and from there into mainstream coverage. The pastors who had been in the room began telling their own audiences directly. What was said in the meeting by the participants' own subsequent statements: disclosure was coming, non-human craft would be acknowledged, and the Pentagon was preparing to release files. The pastoral community needed to be ready because, in their assessment, many ordinary Christians would lose their faith when the announcement landed, having been taught that the Bible was inerrant and that humans were the only intelligent species in creation. Bishop Didio, in his public statements after the leak, used the phrase propaganda plan. He framed what was coming as deliberate manipulation of the religious population, designed to destabilize Christian faith and replace it with a new framework friendlier to the institutions managing the disclosure. Larry Ragland told his audience that during the meeting, government officials present indicated that the beings involved were reptilian in appearance. Tony Merkel and Mike Signorelli, in their respective platforms, conveyed slightly different versions of the same general claim: that a coordinated event was being prepared, that pastors had been quietly contacted to receive advance briefing, and that the proper Christian response was spiritual warfare prayer and prophetic preparation. Eric Burleson, after the story broke, confirmed that he had been on a call with a group of pastors, but pushed back on the strongest claims attached to him. Larry Ragland subsequently issued a public apology to Burleson for having attributed interpretations to the congressman that the congressman himself had not voiced. Some of the pastors' framings contain elements that no one in the meeting actually said. They are the participants' interpretations of what they were told, filtered through their pre-existing theological frameworks. I am not asking you to take the pastor's testimony as objective fact. It is testimony, with the weight of testimony and no more. The architecture, however, is documented. In early 2026, months before the May file releases, a group of American evangelical leaders met privately during a major religious broadcasting convention, received some form of briefing about coming UAP disclosures, and walked out determined to prepare their audiences for an event they had been told was imminent. By the time the files dropped in May, the framework was already in the air, already being preached, already absorbing what the public was about to be shown. The pastors were ready before the public knew there was anything to be ready for. The political tier moved in parallel. Anna Paulina Luna, Republican Congresswoman from Florida, chair of the House Task Force on the Declassification of Federal Secrets and co-chair of the Congressional UAP Caucus, has been the most theologically explicit voice in the House on this material. On the Joe Rogan Experience 2365, recorded on August 13, 2025, Luna told Rogan that she had seen in classified briefings photographic evidence of craft not made by mankind. She used the word interdimensional. She connected the phenomena to the Book of Enoch, the ancient Jewish apocalypse, canonical only in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, which contains the story of 200 angels, the Watchers, who descend to Mount Hermon, take human wives, and teach humanity the forbidden arts of metallurgy, weapons making, and astrology. Luna was specific about one distinction. "I'm not saying that these things are angels," she told Rogan. "That's not at all what I'm saying." The category she reached for was interdimensional beings, a vocabulary that in her tradition carries weight not far behind the angelic category, though she has been careful to keep the two technically distinct. In April of 2026, in remarks circulated through Charisma magazine, she put it this way: "This advanced technology was referenced in the Book of Enoch. I think that the Bible is pretty clear that humanity was not its only creation." On May 8th, the day of the first Pursue release, Luna posted to her social media an image of a biblically accurate angel. multiple wings, rings of eyes, wheels within wheels. The figure from Ezekiel 1, rendered in modern art. Asked by reporters whether the post was connected to the file release, she said it was not, unrelated. A modern-day interpretation of the angelic form. Whether Anna Paulina Luna believes she is being coy or being precise, what she did is on the record. The chair of the Federal Task Force on Classified Material, a person who has actually read what most of us will never see, chose, in the hours after the largest UAP declassification in American history, to publish a wheel within a wheel, and then to deny that the image was related to anything in particular. J.D. Vance, Vice President of the United States, did the same work in a different vocabulary. October 30th, 2025, on Pod Force 1 with Miranda Devine, 6 months before the May release, Vance gave the early version. I'm a big believer that there are things out there that we can't explain. And so, if another person sees an alien, maybe I see an angel or a demon. I'm a big believer that there are like spiritual forces working on the physical world that a lot of us don't see, and a lot of us don't understand, and a lot of us don't appreciate. In March of 2026, 6 weeks before Pursue went live, Vance went on to The Benny Show and stopped hedging. I don't think they're aliens. I think they're demons anyway, but that's a longer discussion. The closing line of that appearance is the most theologically aggressive statement made about the UAP question by a senior American government official in the modern era. One of the great tricks of the devil is to convince people that he never existed. A direct echo of Charles Baudelaire's 1864 short story Le Jour Généreux, popularized in modern American culture by the 1995 film The Usual Suspects. The Vice President of the United States, speaking on a conservative podcast, framing the entire UAP question as a theater of cosmic deception, in which the existence of the phenomena themselves is part of a larger trick by an enemy whose name he names. Vance is a Catholic convert. He was received into the Roman Catholic Church in 2019. He is one of the most theologically literate American politicians of his generation, meaning that when he says demon, he is using a word whose history he probably knows. The Catholic tradition Vance has converted into is also the tradition that produced Cardinal Leon Joseph Suenens, whose book Renewal and the Powers of Darkness, with a preface by then Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, later Pope Benedict XVI, explicitly rejects the binary cosmology Vance is now using. The Catholic Church, at its institutional core, has been telling its own theologians for decades not to use demon the way the American vice president is now using it on television. Either Vance is making a deliberate theological choice against the institutional teaching of his own church, or he is using the word more loosely than its history permits. Either way, he is doing it on national broadcast, and the framing is doing the work. The Catholic institutional voice has been there too, and has been, in its own way, even more remarkable. Pope Leo XIV, born Robert Francis Prevost in Chicago, the first pope of American origin in the 2,000-year history of the Roman Catholic Church, was elected on May 8, 2025. Almost exactly 1 year before the day the war.gov/UFO portal would go live. On June 16, 2025, in the Clementine Hall of the Apostolic Palace, the new pope received participants of the Vatican Observatory Summer School. The theme of the summer school that year was the James Webb Space Telescope. In his prepared remarks to the audience, Pope Leo said this: "For the first time, we are able to peer deeply into the atmosphere of exoplanets where life may be developing. Where life may be developing, the grammatical present continuous, not where life might once have existed, not in environments theoretically capable of supporting life, but may be developing." The Pope was discussing astrobiology, not UAPs directly, and the reading I am giving the sentence is not the only one available. Catholic apologists pushed back almost immediately, arguing that the Pope was speaking about scientific possibility in general terms and not making a doctrinal pronouncement. What is not in dispute is that the new American Pope, in his second month in the chair of Peter, in a setting designed precisely to address scientists and astronomers, publicly affirmed that the discovery of extraterrestrial biology is, in the current state of human knowledge, a coherent possibility that the Church is prepared to think about. The Vatican has been at this longer than most people realize. In May of 2008, the Vatican astronomer José Gabriel Funes, in an interview published in L'Osservatore Romano, said that believing in the possibility of extraterrestrial intelligent life is not in opposition to Catholic doctrine, and added that, in his view, such beings would simply be our brothers, different children of the same Creator. In 2014, Pope Francis told reporters that if extraterrestrials arrived asking for baptism, he would not refuse them. The framework he used invoked little green Martians with long noses and big ears, in the kind of language that disarms the question by making it look childish while still leaving the substantive position on the record. The Catholic Church, in other words, has been institutionally rehearsing for the public emergence of extraterrestrial biology for at least 18 years. Brother Guy Consolmagno, Jesuit astronomer and current director of the Vatican Observatory, has said publicly, multiple times in interviews going back to 2010, that he would baptize an alien if asked, and that the question is not actually that interesting from a Catholic theological standpoint, because we already have a doctrine of creation broad enough to handle it. The Catholic response to disclosure has been built. The infrastructure exists. Astronomers on staff, theologians on retainer, doctrinal positions worked out, press-friendly Jesuit spokesmen ready to take the call. When the call came, in May of 2026, the Vatican was already prepared. Outside the Catholic and evangelical mainstream, the framework gets even more direct. Charlie Duke, the 10th man to walk on the moon, Apollo 16, lunar module pilot, April 1972, has said in interviews that nothing human can make a 90-degree turn at 3,000 miles per hour and survive, and then added that the purpose of the demonstrations is to draw people away from the real God. Marjorie Taylor Greene, who at the time of her appearance on Real Time with Bill Maher on November 1, 2025, was the sitting Republican congresswoman from Georgia, was asked by Maher whether she believed in demons and the devil. Her answer was direct. "Absolutely, I'm a Bible-believing Christian, and I believe those could be fallen angels." Maher pressed her. "Fallen angels? The aliens are fallen angels?" "That's possible. I think that's what they could be. That's what makes sense in my worldview." Greene resigned from Congress in late November 2025, effective January 5, 2026, following her public break with President Trump. At the time she made the fallen angel statement on national television, she was a sitting member of the United States House of Representatives. Tim Burchett, Republican congressman from Tennessee and member of the House Task Force on the Declassification of Federal Secrets, has cited Ezekiel 1 explicitly in his public statements about the UAP files. "I don't have a problem with it," he told Courthouse News in May 2026. "If you think we're the best that God can do, then you've pretty much limited God." Tucker Carlson has built an entire arc of his independent media platform, multiple long-form interviews, several documentaries in progress, around the demonological reading of UAP phenomena. He is, by audience size, the loudest American media figure currently working in this frame. The framework is arriving straight from the center of American religious and political life, with the explicit endorsement of the Vice President, the chair of the relevant federal task force, multiple sitting and former members of Congress, the largest independent media figure in conservative America, and, in its softer Catholic version, the Pope. Other frameworks are still available. This one is the loudest, and volume in the present media environment is most of what determines which framework will sound 6 months from now like what the country always believed. A final piece of evidence bears directly on whether the public is, in any sense, prepared for what is being prepared for it. In June of 2026, a British charity called the Unhidden Foundation, founded by John Priestland, a former Cabinet Office official and physicist whose career has spanned UK government, finance, and now public interest disclosure work, published a document called Preparing for Disclosure, a public health framework for paradigm-shifting revelations. Far from a UFO advocacy paper, this is a technical public health risk assessment, drawing on existing literature about disaster mental health response, applied to the specific scenario of a confirmed disclosure of non-human intelligence. Its central estimate, between 3.5 and 10.6% of the adult population may require psychosocial support in the event of confirmed disclosure. 3.5% of the global adult population is approximately 210 million people. 10.6% is approximately 636 million. The lower bound is roughly the population of Brazil. The upper bound is roughly the population of Latin America and the Caribbean. The estimate is a forecast, with all the uncertainty attached to any forecast. It is built by cross-referencing disaster mental health data. Fukushima, Hurricane Katrina, Grenfell Tower, the COVID-19 pandemic, against the specific psychological characteristics of an event that challenges foundational worldview, rather than merely material well-being. The Royal Society of London, the oldest scientific institution in the English-speaking world, anticipated this question in a published volume from 2010, recommending that any confirmed disclosure event should be accompanied by a coordinated public health response. The American psychiatrist John Mack, Harvard Medical School, Pulitzer Prize winner for his biography of T.E. Lawrence, spent the last decade of his life, from the early 1990s until his death in 2004, studying what he called ontological shock in people who had had what they described as encounters with non-human intelligence. His 1994 book, Abduction: Human Encounters with Aliens, was professionally controversial at the time. The condition he was describing, a paradigm-level disruption of the patient's basic framework for understanding reality, is now being modeled by the Unhidden Foundation at the scale of the general population. Hundreds of millions of people, by the conservative estimate. This is what the religious institutions are preparing for. This is the vacuum. The pastoral briefings in Tennessee and the Vatican press conferences and the Pope's astrobiology remarks are designed to fill before someone less qualified fills it first. The institutions know that something is coming for which the modern Western public is not psychologically equipped. The institutions also know that whoever provides the first interpretive framework will, almost certainly, own that interpretation for a generation. The pastors were ready, as were the Pope, the Vice President, and the chair of the Federal Declassification Task Force. The people who are not ready are the ones the framework is being installed on top of. That is most of us. And then in June of 2026 came the final piece. On June 13th, 2026, one day after the third Pursue release, the Harvard astrophysicist Avi Loeb announced on Medium the creation of what he called the UAP Science Advisory Council. The council had been requested, by his own account, by the White House, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, the FBI, and the broader intelligence community. Its mission, as described in its own documents, to provide scientific guidance to the United States government on the nature of UAP, to recommend how to collect better data, and to report to a higher interagency UAP governance board. Loeb chairs it. The other members, named publicly across June and July of 2026, include Professor Carol Cleland, philosopher of science from the University of Colorado Boulder, seated for anomaly identification, Dr. Tim Gallaudet, former Rear Admiral of the U.S. Navy and former acting NOAA administrator, seated for oceanography, Professor Gary Nolan of Stanford, seated for molecular biology and materials science, Professor Matthew Soidagis, physicist, seated for instrumentation and data collection, Professor Robin Hanson, seated for statistics and economics, Ben Lamb, CEO of Colossal Biosciences, seated for oceanography and biology, Dr. Devesh Nandal, seated for numerical analysis and astrophysics, Dr. Richard Cloete, seated for data analysis and AI tools, Dr. Kevin Knuth, seated for physics and instrumentation. And then the seats that should make us pause, Dr. Omer Eldadi, seated for data management, AI, and human psychology, Dr. Janice Vilhauer, seated for quantitative psychology, a second psychologist on the same council, Dr. Peter Skafish, anthropologist, Ross Howard, science communicator, and Dr. Michael Shermer, founder of Skeptic magazine, the most prominent professional debunker in the English-speaking world, seated for what Loeb described as the study of anomalies. 5 of the 15 seats, a third of the council, are not aimed at the objects. They are aimed at the audience, at how the human public will receive, interpret, argue about, and be told what is found. The chair of the council titled his own announcement, "Keeping Our Eyes on the Orbs, Not the Audience." He then assembled a council nearly half of which is staffed for the audience. I will not say this is sinister, I will say what it is. This may be the answer to a question this entire video has been circling. The institutions are not improvising. The pastors, the Pope, the Vice President, the chair of the Federal Task Force, the British Public Health Establishment, the Royal Society of London going back to 2010, and now an interdisciplinary scientific council with psychologists and anthropologists and a professional skeptic and a communication strategist. All of it begins when you stand back to look less like a series of independent reactions to a Pentagon disclosure and more like an orchestrated preparation. A preparation for the largest revelation in human history, said not by a YouTube researcher, but by the science itself. We are not alone, and they know who we are. In the next video of this series, I will tell you why these non-human intelligences have been at the center of every single human religion since the beginning of our history. Moses at the burning bush, the 3 men who ate with Abraham under the oak, Ezekiel and the wheel within a wheel, Daniel by the Tigris, the cave of Hira, the Sumerian Anunnaki who built the original temples of Ur. None of it was metaphor. The texts treat each one as event, a specific human being, a specific encounter, a specific aftermath written on the body and the memory. If those encounters were real, if the beings the texts describe were physical, intelligent, and not human, they are the beginning of religion. And this is the path we'll follow in the next video. See you there.